First talk in English, which is a big keynote, something we are... I don't really know what to expect. I never know what to expect from this man. But it's really interesting to have him here, and I just want you to say welcome to Max Hillebrand. He will talk about parallel structures.
Hello and welcome. Unfortunately, my Spanish is not good enough to bring you any insightful talk, so let's do it in English. I hope you don't mind. Let's do it interactive as well. If you have any questions, raise your hand. I'll give you, or someone will give you a mic, hopefully, and then we'll have a bit of a dialogue here. So let's talk about the second realm, right? How to build one, and what's the future of freedom, so to say. So let's start with definitions. What is a second realm, actually? The title was, I think, first coined in a book by an OG cypherpunk called Smuggler in 2013. And it was a book on strategy. That was the subtitle. So it laid out an actionable pathway to a more free society where we don't have to vote for politicians and to wait until they grant us the freedom. No, it was a strategy on how can we actually build the freedom today, right, in our lifetime. And the second realm stands in contrast to the first realm. Right? So the first realm is the realm of coercion, of violence, of the state, right? Where businessmen have to ask for permission to be useful and provide a service, where they are taxed and punished for being profitable, and where they ultimately don't have the freedom to choose on which problems they can solve and how they can solve these problems. A lot of intervention, right? Price controls, etc. This leads to a lack of problem solving. That's what entrepreneurs ultimately do. And that means a less prosperous, a less rich, a less free society. So that's not good. I think we all feel that a lack of freedom is quite a painful thing. And then comes the other side of the coin, the second realm. A realm that is different from the first. Right? A realm where we have freedom to solve each other's problems, to be useful, right? To get paid for the valuable work that we do, and to accumulate our capital such that we can solve ever greater and more complex problems. That is the realm of freedom, of prosperity. And even though the last couple hundred years have showed us that a free market is a tremendously successful thing in pulling humanity out of the depths of poverty and starvation. Right? We've seen this with the Industrial Revolution, where for the first time we really could accumulate capital and apply it on a large scale, that this solves a tremendous amount of problems, and that it allows us the division of labor, right? Where we can each focus and specialize on the one thing that we're really best at. And if we all do that, and we trade among each other, we build something quite incredible. So how can we get back to this in the 21st century? Right? What is the strategy to build the second? Where to attack and how to attack? And if we have systems of privacy that are cheap to use, like encryption, your computer can do it 1 million times a second, right? Then we can broadly use these tools without having to worry about it. And on the other side, if these privacy techniques are hard to attack, again with the sense of encryption, even with the most powerful supercomputer, you're not going to break AES encryption. Right? It's simply not happening. So this means we have a cheap form of defense that leads to an expensive form of attack. And that is a great balance where individuals are protected and cannot be attacked. Right? So privacy makes this form of attack quite expensive. And it allows us to distribute at scale and to build an economy that cannot be stopped, ultimately. So this is quite a wonderful achievement that the early cypherpunks have given us. And it shows that we could finally build more than just a communication layer. We could build the first anonymous digital transactions. That's all the way 1983, where David Chaum came up with the concept of anonymous digital tokens, eCash, right? That nowadays have a renaissance with Cashew and Fediment in the Bitcoin ecosystem. So here we have a way to privately, fast and cheaply transfer value from one person to another. Right? Now it's possible to get paid in cyberspace. And that is incredible, because payment is of course integral to a market economy. Right? Entrepreneurs would like to be rewarded for the valuable work that they've done. And with eCash, with digital cash, we can do this. There was, however, the downside that the early versions of digital cash relied on one central server that was there to create the rules of this monetary unit, like, for example, how many tokens do exist, and also to settle the transactions. We could use strong encryption, specifically blind signatures, to ensure that that central party could not spy on its users, but nevertheless, he had the privilege of running the server that upheld the system. And so in 2008, Satoshi came up with a way that we can distribute the responsibility of keeping up with this monetary system into everyone's hands. Right? That's why running a full node is so powerful, because now you have the full responsibility and the ability to define the rules of your monetary system, to verify that transactions on your monetary systems are valid, and to enforce anyone who tries to break your transactions or the transactions of others. Right? This is now your responsibility and your opportunity to ensure that the money that you use to get paid is a valid one. And even further, you can start mining, which later at the conference we'll talk a bit more about, ensuring that new transactions keep added to the blockchain, right? Ensuring that the monetary system survives in the future as well. So Satoshi showed us that we have to take things into our own hands. We can't rely on trusted third parties to upkeep something as fundamentally important as our money system. And just as Cypherpunks before showed us, that something as important as our communication system cannot be outsourced to a trusted third party. And if you want to be secure, encrypt the messages to your own keys, right, and those of your friends, ensuring that nobody else, no trusted third party, has the privilege of keeping your secrets a secret. And now, once we have an anonymous communication system and an anonymous digital cash system, now we can build a marketplace, an agora, right? And it started, well, even before Silk Road, but Silk Road was the prime, starting point of a sound economy in cyberspace based on Bitcoin, right, with PGP encryption. And it might have been a bit cumbersome to use, might be a bit expensive to start to get going with it. But it was such a powerful idea that hundreds of thousands of merchants started to enter this economy and provide useful services to others without asking for permission. That was quite a beautiful thing, right? Nevertheless, this marketplace was centralized, right? It ran on a set of servers, was developed by a small group of people. And a centralized system can easily be stopped simply by cutting its head off, which unfortunately happened. But now, many years later, we've further advanced the technology that enables the next wave of second realm tools to be built, right? Nostr, as a simple system that uses private public key cryptography, signatures and encryption, to share structured data, just messages with some metadata, via a wide network of multiple relays. And with this incredibly primitive standard, we can build an incredible amount of new technologies. Right? This is not just to make your posts online or to write a blog, right? or send encrypted direct messages. Oh, this is much more. Right? Now we can prove to others that we actually value someone's content by zapping him some money. We can run marketplaces, right? Not just for trading Bitcoin for fiat, but for buying any goods or service. And with this new technology, we're no longer reliant on a single server to issue the identities of the market participants or to hold and transmit the data. Right? Now, this is again distributed to the responsibility of every one of us. And ultimately, this means we have not just 1,000 small marketplaces that are each kind of siloed. Now we have this network, a broader network, where any market participant of any one marketplace can trade with the others. Right? A shared order book that is commonly understood by anyone. And with the ability for any one of you to write a new software implementation that interprets and makes usable this marketplace. That's incredible, right? You can now, specifically with the help of AI, you can vibe code in a day or so a new marketplace implementation that focuses on the niche that you want to solve. And, that's yet another incredible advancement that the cypherpunks have enabled to decrease the cost of building the tools needed for a second realm. So we're really at a quite breathtaking point if you look back. Like 30, 40 years ago, the number of cypherpunks was less than 10. It was a tiny mailing list that nobody cared about. Yet they have grandiose ideas of how to create a freer future for all of us. And because of their dedication, and because of their curiosity and their drive to come up with something new and beautiful, now we can count the cypherpunks in the tens of thousands. We can even have conferences dedicated to cypherpunks. That's incredible, right? So it really shows that we've succeeded to a very large extent to spark that idea of freedom in the minds of many people. And ultimately, this battle will be won with ideas as well. Because ideas have people, and we need people. We need people to build, right? Not just the tools of the cypherpunks, but we need people to build anything. Food, shelter, right? Transportation technology, etc. Every single part of the economy is essential for the flourishing of humanity. So we not only have to build online tools, we literally have to build it all. At the moment, the vast majority of economic power is in the first realm, where it's hindered, right, and held back. And that is a tremendous cost to humanity that we don't actually have to bear. We can move all of these technologies into a freer alternative, right? And that will be essential, because all the useful goods and services that we would like to utilize will sooner or later be thwarted and shut down in the first realm. It has happened numerous times, especially in the last couple of years, where entire market segments were simply abolished by the state. And there's something that we can do about that. Right? We can opt out. We can leave the first realm of coercion and violence and build something beautiful in the second realm. And this is all up to any one of us, to make that choice of build something delightful, something useful, while not asking for permission, right? While simply doing it and being awesome while doing it. This is possible, and I think we have an obligation to do so. This is not just for us, right? This is for humanity, for our children and their children's children. Because any capital that we accumulate now will pay back itself tenfold in the future. And the sooner we start with creating and accumulating this capital, the sooner we will reap the benefits of more large-scale economy in the future. I'd imagine if the Industrial Revolution was delayed by 50, 100 years, right, because people were too afraid to innovate and to build something new. We would not be here, right? Millions of people would not even be born because we couldn't have afforded it. Right? So it's on us for building that freer future. And we stand on the shoulders of giants, on the early cypherpunks, who've come up not just with the tools, but especially with the ideas. And we have a plethora of books, right? The Second Realm, a book on strategy. It's a must-read for anyone in this room. There's A Lodging of Wayfaring Men, right? A story of a group of the first cypherpunks in roughly the 2000s, built a first digital cash, first marketplace, first company registration system. In the 2000s, right? These ideas that we have nowadays, they're not new. They're quite old. And we can learn from the histories of the past to make sure that we're building something that will stand the test of time. So I think this was a long enough ramble. So let's take some questions. I'm curious to what you think about this topic and which area you want to hear more about. Thank you. Microphone runner. I'll just repeat then, I guess.
So regarding building
Que no vino hace falta. A que no vino hace falta micrófono.
No, pero para que salga la grabación. Cierto. So, hey, okay, it works. So regarding creating this second realm, this parallel structures, what happens when the Leviathan, the big aging elefantiásico is how we say in Spanish, is like a huge elephant, you know, starts dying and it like starts attacking the people that are building the second realm, like we've seen with like the Tornado Cash guys or the Samurai Wallet guys. Like, how do we deal with that? How is it just part of the process of the revolution, or can we somehow work against that or protect against that with encryption and all of that and the tools that cypherpunks have built for us? Thank you.
The number of cypherpunks that have fallen in this battle is large, right? And it started a long time ago, with legal battles, with physical attacks, with extortion and threats of violence. Get used to it, expect it. When a thief loses its power to steal, he panics, right? Because that's the only thing that he knows that he's good at. And they are very good at stealing, right? So that is something to expect, but something we can deal with, right? First of all, we have tools of defense, right? Tools of defense that are incredibly powerful. Encryption actually works, right? We can encrypt our group messages, with something like the messaging layer security protocol. Scales to thousands, tens of thousands of participants in a group. And that allows us to continue building in the shadows. Not using their monetary system. That's another big one, right? That for one hastens their demise, because as we increase the demand for fiat currencies, hyperinflation will come sooner. And ultimately the value of Bitcoin increases, right, if we use alternative currencies as such. And there's nothing that can be stopped there. But ultimately, any security in cyberspace relies on the security of meat space. I'd imagine you create a new Bitcoin wallet and you write down your 12 words, but there's a camera behind you. Right? This little drone flying in the air with a telescope being able to see the words that you're writing down. Your meat space security is compromised, and so your security in cyberspace is as well. Your money is gone, your encryption is gone. Right? That is a big problem. So we do need to build alternative physical spaces that are secure. It's one of the big points of the Second Realm book, actually. How do we create secure physical spaces? But we can. And the good thing is that the world is a large place, right? Extremely large. And we just need, a small little cabin in the woods, where we can have a temporal autonomous zone, right? An autonomous zone that is free of violence and coercion, but it can be temporary. We don't need to live in this place for 100 years to come. Because when in the conflict with the state, de-escalation and evacuation is quite commonly a beneficial strategy. They have the money printer. They can outgun you. Right? So simply move. Take your capital, right? Take all the resources that you can, and start building in another place. Usually to gun it out with an adversary is not really that beneficial, because both parties will lose. Both parties will sustain tremendous damages. Building is much more productive than fighting. And since the world is such a big place, de-escalating at a point of conflict is quite beneficial. A great book on this is called Alongside Night. A group of underground builders who have this temporal autonomous zone. And as it gets attacked, they already have a rescue plan, an evacuation plan, into the second facility that is already being built for the last year or so. So have modularity and multiple options in meat space to protect your physical body.
Right, that's pretty much everything. We'll move to the next talk because we will do a Q&A with you, Max, so don't go away.
Thank you.
Okay, now we'll just continue listening to Max, but also now listening to a mind strategist called Begleri. He will make the questions that we want to listen to and the ones we do not want to listen to. So go away.
Thank you very much. First of all, excuse for my English. It's not my best language. And I want to ask about the idea of that Europe is going to become maybe the last cemetery. So we are seeing how inspirational Bitcoiners are moving from their countries to other places to build communities there, because you cannot build here in Europe. I would say that's the place where we can see Bitcoiners that are continue working and spending their time in fiat jobs to change it for Bitcoin, thinking that, okay, fiat economy is collapsing, so I'm just stacking. They're not investing their time in create or building these new communities. So all this capital is moving away from Europe. What is to expect from this adoption, the soft adoption? We are not going to see that politicians or countries are going into Bitcoin if it's not saved by our commanders or politicians. So if real Bitcoiners, real plebs are just moving and waiting and building in their local communities, as I think is the way, is just to expect that this adoption is never makes sense at all. I mean, I'm a person that I think that if more people understand and knows about Bitcoin, it doesn't care at all. What cares is the price. Price means the entry, the Pacific entry to this new world economy. So when the price collapses, there is no Pacific entry. So everything is about just the volume, not about how many people understand that we are going into this new war, into new economy. So I expect for Europe absolutely a cemetery. It was built, the idea was to build this Bitcoin community in the beginning, because it was not, it was just Ethereum people trying to lend money to projects here in Barcelona, because Barcelona is maybe one of the most important cities in Europe. But we created this to create debate, and now after a few years is what we got. It was amazing, but to understand that maybe it was just a symbol, was a place where to find each other, but we're gonna get crushed soon. I mean, many people here understood that we're gonna get crushed. So how is your vision about Europe and European Bitcoin communities?
Yeah, Europe is failing on many levels, right? The amount of socialism here is unreal, and extremely scary, and it has been on a downtrend for a long time. So I'm bearish on Europe for sure. That's why I left, right? I'm a refugee. However, there is still good reason to keep building in these local areas. The idea of the second realm, the parallelny polis, actually comes from Czechoslovakia, which was under Soviet Union occupation, where a philosopher called Václav Bender coined this term, right? Because he was living under an extremely oppressive regime, right? Hardcore communism. Well, it's not real communism, right? That hasn't been tried, but it was almost there. The question is, how do we live a free life despite such an extremely oppressive regime? And the answer is to do it privately. Right? Your public face is part of the Communist Party, because if you're not part of the Communist Party, you go to the Gulag. Right? You do send your kids to government school, because if you don't, you go to the Gulag. Right? And you put in your business the big sign of, workers of the world unite, because if you don't, you go to the Gulag. But that's only your public-facing face, right? A mask that you wear. Underneath that can still be the spark of freedom that you foster with your friends in the basement at night at a speakeasy, right? Reading poetry of freedom, right? Teaching the ideas of logic and reason to your kids. Right? That is the parallel society, an underground society that can exist despite, or maybe because, of the vast amount of tyranny. Right? So maybe we can't make public conferences like this in a couple years because the SWAT team will show up. I'm still surprised that hasn't happened yet, by the way. Sooner or later it will. Right? But then we'll just keep going in the shadows. And it might be smaller gatherings, but there will be many.
And another one, if later somebody wants to make some more questions, thank you, is about these new places where we are going to build these new communities. For example, we saw El Salvador or other countries talking about the Bitcoin Island. Come Bitcoiners, change your money for our land. And again, selling private property and selling this idea that it makes sense. liberals also, liberals Bitcoiners inside the Bitcoin ecosystem are also very dangerous, their ideas. But if you are trying to attract all this capital, these Bitcoiners, is a central point of failure. You can attack this point. I think that our historic event that I took as a reference is Slovo building in Ukraine, Kharkiv, how Communist Party took there all the academics and intellectual people from the epoch, and in less than a year killed 32, 35 poets, artists, historiadori. Historians, thank you. So if you put together all the people that you want to destroy, it's easier. So I'm not going to move to a Bitcoin island or to the Bitcoin neighborhood, all these things. I think that we have to keep it just as we have been doing, making it something online communities as we are creating right now. But if we try to do something physically together, it's going to be something very risky, because there is not many people as here. I mean, we are not thousands of Bitcoiners that can lead or can revolution nothing. There is less, not that big amount of people that really has the understanding and bravery to really change things. So it's very risky to get involved in these projects.
Yes, don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? And this is where the concept of a temporal autonomous zone is so interesting, because we build it in mind that it won't last forever. And we have an escape route planned, and importantly, already a second facility. What I think would be the best strategy is to have a network of citadels, right? Not just one in one country, but hundreds, thousands, right? In all over the world. Again, we don't need to have the shiny castle on the hill. We can meet in someone's basement, right? Put up a couple beds there, have a couple computers, and that's it, right? It doesn't need to be fancy. It just needs to be free. And that ability to build these free spaces globally is extremely important and powerful. So to some extent, I appreciate all of you staying back in Barcelona in Spain, trying to save the country from utter collapse by building this parallel society here. That is important work. Just also build yourself the network outside of the country. Because it might be very likely that you will not be able to save it here, that it will continue to escalate into the worst direction for a long time to come, and then you better have an escape plan. So build your communities, not just locally, which is extremely important, but also internationally.
I like this solution. Thank you very much. Somebody else wants to ask something?
Well, thank you for the talk. You said something interesting about being in the shadows, and I'm 32 years old, and I use MSN Messenger a lot. I think a lot of people here use the MSN Messenger. And my first email was called bostonslime@hotmail.com. I've never been to Boston, but I think everyone back then was trying to come up with the most creative email address. So I think it's the thing you said about the shadows. I kind of feel like back then everyone was trying to be anonymous on the internet without knowing it, as if it's the intuitive way of using technology. So I understand that encryption is a foreign concept to a lot of people, but at the same time it feels like people that don't know about encryption tend to do encrypted things. You understand what I mean? Do you feel like the anonymous cyberpunk way is the intuitive way to go for a human to approach technology and networks? Thank you.
That's a great question, and I would agree. I think freedom is the default, more broadly speaking. I think we're kind of indoctrinated or taught to accept slavery as a reality, but in reality, we all want to be free, right? And privacy online is, I think, a very common thing, right? Especially, it used to be in the early days. Like, everyone had nicknames. It was quite rare to actually use your public-facing identity online. And maybe this changed with Facebook, right? Because Facebook really made it the default of, hey, what's your name? What's your first name? What's your last name? What's your address? Where did you go to school? And there we just see the power of technologies and that defaults matter, right? If the default is pick up any email address and that's it, right? Then people are likely to choose an interesting, creative name. If the default says name, last name, address, and so on, then people will just do that. This really shows how much of a responsibility we builders have, because the defaults that we build into our softwares will be used by the vast majority of users of the system. So really consider the creation of tools that do not require identity by default, right? That have strong encryption by default, that have private transactions by default, right? Where the user has the power to selectively choose whom to tell what. This is something that technology can do. Early technologies of the internet did do that, and then for some reason we went on a different path, which arguably was for the worse. But that also means that we can fix it, right? By using different systems. And I guess, for example, we see this with Nostr. A lot of people on Nostr use creative names. Right? There's quite few that have their first name, last name in Nostr on, to share their messages with. It's not zero, but it's not 100%. Right? So here, that makes me quite bullish that if we build technologies that represent the default desire of humans, which I would argue is freedom and privacy, then more and more people will use it simply because it's the default, and then they will realize that they like it, and actually double down in this direction. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Behind you.
I'll just take it there.
Hi, thanks for the talk, Max. We're talking a lot about default privacy, default features. We all know that Bitcoin's been attacked. You can even argue that now it's being attacked. I don't think any of us like the poster boys that we have online, MicroStrategy, etc. And what do you think of the vectors by which Bitcoin's being attacked that we need to watch out for? So we speak about base layer transparency, and then what we build underneath that to safeguard not having too much transparency. Or it could be something about Gaille's cashew and the mint that he's building there. Or how we deal with Lightning, for example. What are the vulnerabilities and how can we watch out for them? Because a lot of things are not default on the Bitcoin standard. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I guess the realization is that building systems that are by private default is quite difficult, actually. Transparent, centralized systems are way easier to build, arguably, but probably that's the case. And so we have that problem with Bitcoin, right? It's already such an almost insurmountably difficult problem to solve. And it's almost a miracle that Satoshi actually came up with a useful solution that's still around 15 years later. To make that private is extremely difficult, right? And we see that it comes with trade-offs. Systems like Monero or Zcash, even though they do take the default privacy level much further, they come at a cost of or sacrificing the ease of verification. Right? Running a Monero node is much more computationally expensive compared to running a Bitcoin node at the same level of transactions. And again, verification is quite an important part of the money system. So to build a protocol that is private and cheap and easy to use is challenging. Not impossible, but challenging. And another downside is that monetary systems are really hard to change. Any network effect protocol is really hard to change. That's why we still have IPv4 addresses, right? And IPv6, even though for 20 years or something, is still not widely adopted. Changing of a networked system is extremely costly. So this is a problem. However, I think a lot of these issues can be addressed on a higher level. Right? So for example, CoinJoin is a beautiful solution to the privacy problem of Bitcoin that only requires changes on the wallet infrastructure. Doesn't need to change the protocol or full node infrastructure. Right? So that's a higher layer solution. Lightning Network, another genius way of reducing the amount of information that has to be shared about your financial transactions. Again, a second layer, higher level solution. Cashew, as you brought up, or Fedimint, anonymous money warehouses in Bitcoin, yet another layer on top of Lightning that continues to improve the defaults in a new system, right, where we can start over from scratch, where we don't have to change the old underlying system, but building something new on top with better principles from the get-go. It's extremely difficult to do this, but not impossible. And this is again where the call comes to the builders, that we need more smart people to think about this and to become active and build those technologies and research how we can create new systems that are better, but also how to improve the underlying foundational technologies. Even though that's a difficult task, it's not impossible. Right? Yeah. Next questions.
We're going to make the last question.
Ooh, no pressure.
In Matrix, the attack vector was Agent Smith, right? And he could just transform and take the body of anyone who was deeply asleep. So how do you see this compared to us building technology and building tools, whereas there's a big mass, I don't want to say majority because I don't know, but a big mass of people that are asleep? How can we tackle that? And can we?
Yeah, Morpheus was saying in The Matrix, which is a great movie, by the way, you should all watch it, of course, that we don't unplug old people out of the Matrix. Right? They're too much conditioned, they're too used to the existing system, and that might well be the case, right? That people who have lived in a system of slavery, gotten used to it so much that they would even defend it if someone tries to take it away from them. That is a serious problem, and I think we see a lot of pushback to systems like Bitcoin, right? From people who would tremendously benefit from joining the system, but joining the new freer system would mean to abdicate the old system and to say that I was wrong, right? I was deeply mistaken in my old ways, and I should not have done some things, right? That is a difficult thing to do. And so this means that the people who are plugged into the matrix, right, will fight to prolong the matrix. And this doesn't only go for the top enforcers, right, the central bankers and politicians of the world. This goes for everyday people, right? Who because the system of socialism also gives benefits to a lot of people, right? At least perceived benefits, right? You get cheap housing, you get a guaranteed job, right? There's a minimum wage, etc. These are all nicely sounding things that people would want to keep, right? Freedom is scary to a large extent, and so that aspect that people would fight to keep the system going and to prevent you from embracing a freer alternative is absolutely a reality. I mean, maybe prime example was during the COVID lockdown. Your neighbors were snitching on you, right? If you invited friends to your home, they called the police, right? Like maniacs. But many people did that. And this is just one of many examples where you do have to be careful with how loudly you proclaim yourself a freedom maximalist. And here again, the ideas of Václav Bender with the parallel society comes to mind, that it is dangerous to be outrageously free in a system of control and slavery, to some extent because of the cognitive dissonance that starts in the broader society, and potentially also the jealousy. Right? So, yeah, be careful out there and protect yourself against the $5 wrench.
All right, give a huge applause to these guys.
Thank you.